Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much. And of course, thank you so much for a great panel that you have just introduced, Siong, Gerard, Rajan, and Shiu Ling. And of course, we really appreciate your time to share your experience and also your insights with everyone who's tuning in today. As Mark said, we're going to have Q&As as well. So if you can take some time to populate the Q&A box with some of your questions, we will try to address as many of those as we can in the time that we have. I've already spotted a couple of questions that I think I can feed into the panel discussion in a moment. So we're going to have about 45 minutes or so. We will make some time for your questions. So in the meantime, let me just welcome Shiu Ling. Gentlemen, really great to have you on the panel. Maybe we can start by just one very quick thought in reaction to the main themes that Siong has presented over the last hour or so. I know we watched a video, but he's also given many good case examples of companies that have done well in terms of there. What was a key point that stood out for you? Maybe I'll start with Gerard first in this case.
Thank you, Melvin. I think what Siong has pointed out is a rapidly changing world, new paradigms that we need to consider, and being accelerated with the environment we're encountering now with COVID and so forth. So it's happening very fast, and therefore it brings to mind the great importance of board diversity. How do you deal with all this new knowledge, new skills, if your board is not diversified enough? Having funds to purchase the hardware, to adopt IT is just one thing, but how much do you understand about the most basic of cybersecurity? How do you protect your environment? Having bought the computers and having set up your IT system, working with the commercial sector, with the private sector, these are new paradigms. Are your board equipped with it? Do you have enough people with past experiences from the commercial sector that can help you to network and to help you better understand how the other parties think and behave? So I would say number one importance is board diversity. And please, I think it's absolutely timely for all charities to re-look into how balanced their boards are.
Great point, Gerard. I think we're going to spend some time unpacking that issue about board diversity a little later in this conversation. Maybe I bring Shiu Ling into the picture first. I mean, obviously, in your role as CEO of Assisi Hospice, you will work with, people within the charity itself and also with the boards. Maybe to that point about a point that has stood out for you from Siong's presentation, and also in regards to that whole point that Gerard has mentioned about board diversity.
Actually, apart from what Siong has said, there has been a running thread between what Minister said, what Gerard said, and what Siong said, that really we are in this shared space called Singapore, and we are mutually accountable to each other. And therefore, as charities, as corporations, exactly what Siong has said, we are to understand our purpose, we are to leverage on our own competitive advantage to see how we can possibly benefit the rest of the community. And it's precisely what Gerard has said. Only if we have a very diverse board that provides a complete understanding of the environment that we exist in, only with this can we be effective in our purpose, and can we be relevant in how we articulate our purpose?
Great, Shiu Ling, thank you. Rajan, coming on the picture here, a key point that stood out for you from Siong's presentation.
Yes, I think my big takeaway from Siong's presentation is that under the new environment going forward, it's important that charities identify their main stakeholders, and that's what they're trying to do under this under the collapse regime or structure. Charities, I think identifying the right corporations to work with not only requires board diversity, but also requires merging of the goals, both for the charities as well as the private sector boards. I come from a private sector. I know we have been approached many times for charity, but it's also been very useful to engage in purpose and where our direction lies. So there is a better long-term connectivity between the private sector and the respective charities. Corporations have limited abilities to how many charities can work with, and that's important.
You know, the Singapore has, of course, been moving towards a journey to living with COVID. I mean, a lot has been said over the last few weeks about going into the endemic COVID era. In the charity space, though, panelists, how do you think charities are evolving strategically to thrive in this environment as we head into this endemic COVID era? It's almost difficult to say post-COVID now. Of course, we are going to be living with this virus, but in your view, how do you think charities are really, evolving to thrive in this environment that arguably we're still trying to define? Maybe Siong come in first.
Yeah, I think thanks, Melvin. The word I comes to my mind when I think about how charities are operating or what they're operating is complexity. That the external world out there is getting more complex, more hyper-connected. And so to Gerard's point, you need diversity to deal with the myriad aspects of complexity. There are many issues, but the question then is there enough internal variety of capabilities and talents to address the external complexity? And I think the point that Gerard made is very important. Board diversity is crucial to ensure there's internal variety that can respond to the external complexity. And I see some charities are evolving that, because when the boards are diverse enough, they introduce multiple perspectives. And therefore, the thinking becomes richer, broader, holistic. And I see charities having to evolve that way. So that means going into how we work with the public sector, how we work with the private sector. Again, the variety is there. Otherwise, they would continuously redeploy the same approach, but for increasingly more complex challenges. And that will not solve the issue. So that internal variety is what I think will need to evolve, a variety of skills, capabilities internally. And the way to do that is perhaps not to build everything yourself, is to partner. Because there are those who are as good in some ways. Then here comes a challenge. How do you facilitate collaboration and partnerships? That is a leadership function. That is something that obviously requires us community leaders to step up and facilitate those conversations, to forge alignment, to deal with what I would say bigger challenges ahead.
Okay, good point, Siong. Thank you so much for that. Rajan, do you want to come in on this bit? I mean, we talk about how the charities are evolving. Where do you think the direction is in terms of how charities are going to be living with COVID?
In fact, this is a very interesting topic because we are in the process of transiting, but as we discussed within our own boards, what are we transiting to? The uncertainty is so real that we have to imagine some scenarios. Though we know the quick fix are technologies, infrastructure, connectivity, and so on. But how to bring people back into the space? Both we need the physical connectivity in the social work. Electronic connectivity is very useful, but there seems to be a worry that people may resort, or many will resort to that armchair electronic assistance rather than come back in numbers again. There is a concern, but it's not. We are not too worried about it. But we have to work into a new transiting hybrid scenario. But what it is, we are struggling with it. How will it pan out? So that's where the challenge right now is. Many are working on it, but the unknown is the worst enemy.
Okay, maybe something that's more known is Mr. Gerardi, or Dr. Gerardi, I should say. Gerard, as chairman of Charity Council, Rajan was talking about how it's been difficult, it's been challenging for charities to adapt to this environment. Maybe from your point of this discussion, from a Charity Council's point of view, where do you think the help can be given to charities in relation to this transition to endemic COVID?
Well, I think if you look at the scenario right now, the better prepared charities, those that have very strong governance, in addition to dealing with the crisis that they face, putting out fire, they are able to look forward and plan and look at the future scenario, and then start deciding what they need to put into place. It's a process of evolution. For the greater majority of charities who are not yet there, I think while the awareness is there that they need to change, they are too busy right now putting out fires, dealing with events that are happening every day. So I think the greatest help that we can provide to charities in preparing them for the future is to engage charities in conversation, do more ground visits and have discussion with charities and say, okay, what is in your mind? What is it that your board are thinking in the future? And be the sounding board and just say, are you sure? And give alternative view, especially for board right now that don't have that diversity to help them to go through the thinking process. We can provide that. And NVPC and various other bodies do have a body of professionals that can provide this sort of sounding board. I think that is very useful for charities.
Okay, I'm just going to bring Shiu Ling in for a quick reaction to this whole point about transiting to COVID. And then I want to take some questions from the audience because there are a few that are popping in that are very, very pertinent to what we're discussing at this point. So Shiu Ling first, maybe just a quick thought on that whole idea about transiting to COVID, to endemic COVID, that is.
There are actually, I feel, 4 foundational aspects to running a good charity. And in transiting to post-COVID, although we're not post-COVID yet, we need to be even more intentional in these 4 aspects. The first one is a good alignment between board and management. And with this excellent alignment is the understanding that we need excellent corporate governance because that's foundational. It keeps the ship steady. So strong corporate governance. Very importantly, we must invest in our staff endlessly. Learning and development and training our staff is so critical, and only then can we leverage on their collective wisdom to articulate the purpose that we want to achieve. And finally, that we must always remain relevant to the community we serve. And if these 4 come into play and we work on them intentionally, then that's, to me, is the formula for the future.
Indeed, maybe at this point, I just want to bring in some quick questions from our audience, and they are sort of very, very diverse in a way, but maybe let's just pin it down to a few things about the board first, all right? So these are the questions in relation to the board. So Muhammad Sharif Muhammad Yunus is asking, do you really need board diversity if you can arrange meetings with experts on certain matters? In theory, board diversity is just a good theory, but in his words, in the real world, not many experts want to be in the SSA board of directors. Therefore, we need to come up with some other options. These experts do not mind spending some time to help the SSAs, but not to be on the board. Any reactions or any thoughts to that? Gerard?
No, certainly it's very useful to tap on experts' contributions outside, like participating in a conference like that and to hear views, presentations, and so forth. But at the end, the buck stops with the board. The board has to make that final decision for the organization. So the question is, how receptive would the board be if their minds are not opened to the new knowledge and new skills? I work with other organizations, which I shall not name before, and I have sessions with their management team, and they all agree with all the suggestions on governance and so forth. But at the end of the sessions, they always say, but how do I convince my board? My board members have been there for the last 20 years and they're not open to changes. So yeah, it's very useful to have to tap on expert knowledge, consult people and so forth, but the board themselves must be in tune with the changes that's happening. As Shiu Ling say, the alignment between the board and management must be there.
Yeah, Shiu Ling, any thoughts on that? I mean, do you really need diversity? Because you can count on these other people who might be able to volunteer.
Oh, I think volunteers who provide expertise are very important to running of an organization. But a board within the context of a charity plays an absolute strategic role. They have a vested interest in the success of the organization. It is via the composition of the board that you bring in a broad range of ability, expertise, and passion for the cause, and that cannot replace casual expertise. And so, which is why board and management alignment is so critical. Management needs themselves to know how to interact with the board to best leverage on board expertise so that they can better run the organization. So I think it's synergistic between board and management, and that relationship needs to be developed intentionally, and both parties have a role in it.
I have something to add to that question that was raised. I think professionals are quite reluctant to join boards unless there are term limits. There's always this saying out there among professionals, oh, you better don't get involved because you can't get out once you're in. And I think term limits goes a long way because professionals are busy, and if there's a term limits, they know the maximum is a term of 2 years. That's the commitment. They come in, they do their best, or whether it's one term of 2 years or two terms of 2 years each, 4 years. They need to know that there is an exit clause. And that's really is very helpful for professionals. Then they know their time commitment.
Well, talking about that time commitment, Gerard, because there is a related question here coming from, I think it's here, Aloysius Wee, basically saying that should there be compulsory duration, compulsory term limits? So one is the compulsory term limits, and then one is that number of years, if you like. Yeah. And you kind of mentioned 2 years. Is that what you're recommending?
Well, usually it's one term of 2 years, so you can have up to a maximum of 2 terms of 2 years each, so 4 years. I think it depends on the organization, what it does, and the size of the organization. But having term limits certainly takes away that worry from busy professionals about joining organization and not being able to exit. Yeah.
Yeah. I think, Siong, you spoke a little bit about the collaboration between, different parties as a private sector, public sector, even the charities themselves, as today's conference is testimony to. A question coming from Jerome Yun, really in terms of board transformation. He says that it's largely based on the capability of the board members to leave their comfort zones, to embrace the new challenges and new capabilities in the environment. Perhaps not very natural in some sense. How do you think the sector, charity sector, can come together to help boards move in the right direction?
Thanks, Melvin and Jerome, for that question. Yeah, very good question. I mean, how do you start, right? I mean, one of the things that we try to do at NVPC is to try and create some platforms, some form of platform. And Collabs is one of them. Moving forward, the Alliance for Action for Corporate Purpose is another. And the whole idea is to bring board members together as well, leaders, to come together and expose them to the broader view, the broader perspective. But I think the more important thing really is to let them see the possibilities beyond what they are experiencing today. What can be a better version of their charity for fully filling their purpose? You see, the challenge with charity sector is because of the existing structure, there is a certain level of inertia. To want to change requires effort, which sometimes, board members may not feel they have the time, to see it through. But precisely there, you need the board to have diversity to be able to enable them to continue to do that. So we create platforms, whether it's a Center for Nonprofit Leadership, whether for board managing, whether it's collabs, whether it's to have that space for conversation. And I use the word generative, meaning we are trying to generate new ideas from there. And so to Rajan's point, when you transit, where do you transit to? Hopefully through that, they start to have clarity about what the new future, that is a better version of what they are, is, and to then have a strategy for working with management to come up with strategy to execute to that. Now, the art of having that conversation with corporates is a big thing. I mean, it's an important thing. How do we appeal to a higher purpose with a corporate that this benefits both them and the charity sector as well? And I think if we can align that, companies like Singtel, HP, Unilever, these have demonstrated they're already doing it. What about the rest of the companies in Singapore? So that will be my response, man.
There is a follow-up question from Paul Heng related to this, obviously, and I guess it's about NVPC. Having a diversified and effective board is easier said than done. What more can we do to achieve this? Suggestion here is that maybe NVPC can play a more active role in terms of helping with this journey, and not just in the area of board matches.
So certainly, Melvin. I mean, that's on point for that. I think NVPC's part of our purpose is contributing to building capacity at the board level. And depending on the nature of the charities, services and so on, you need different kinds of variety or diversity of board members. And that's something that we can look at and help to match to the professionals. Gerard has a very good point. Professionals, would they commit to, like himself, why do they want to be with the sector for so long? And I'll say that, I like to be a bit optimistic, although I think there is reality because professionals are very busy people. But at some point in time, they do get to a point in their stage in life that they say there must be more to this, what I'm doing now, okay, that I'm not aware of. And that's where I think, giving back to society, helping with the community. And then it's up to us to how do we engage them to align to the individual's purpose, his life purpose, to align with the charity and bring for that. Once you have that, you have a committed person for life, just like Dr. Gerard E here, right? In the sector.
Melvin, I'd like to expand on what Chin Siong has just said. I think it is a major paradigm that I've always held close to my heart. People and organizations support a cause. They don't support organizations in itself. And professionals or other stakeholders will join organization for the cause which they represent or are working on. And I think organizations have to be very careful when the focus is on the organization itself rather than on its clients, its beneficiaries, because the type of solutions they'll be thinking of will be quite different. They will just want to grow and not be thinking about how can I do things better for my clients, what more can I do? And if they want the support of the commercial sector, the common denominator is the community, the people you are serving, not your organization itself. The sustainability and the growth of organization is the consequence of doing the right thing and doing it better.
Yeah, Rajan, you've been very quiet. I know you've been wanting to come in. Please do.
No, it's okay. No particular rush, but taking one step down, what we have tried is, if the board knows generally in which direction they are moving, and if they want to undertake a task, for example, either to develop the IT front or their contractual relationship with the organization, or maybe even a physical redevelopment of the premises, what we do is we normally bring in people to assist the board in spelling out the aims, the ends, and they don't have to be committed for a very long time. So the bandwidth immediately increases over a short term. And these people are very valuable in formalizing what is your need, and then so as to talk to the experts outside. Because communicating with the experts outside, whether it's corporations or whether it is IT experts or whoever it is, you need a certain language skills of what is the real practical discussions to be held. And so you need that kind of competency and bandwidth. So we bring on board people specifically just for helping as the board to structure the whole thing, the aim, and then to get into the communication.
Very good point there. I think I want to bring Cyril Chua's question or opinion in here and see whether we can generate some sort of discussion around it. He says, is there any concern of charity boards evolving into high-powered corporate boards with little nexus to the users of the charity? I think Gerard kind of alluded to this. How do you serve the charity beneficiaries as opposed to, just trying to become a board that looks like a corporate sector board? So the question, the opinion here is that there might be a danger of prescribing services as opposed to listening to what the user wants. Is there a bottom-up approach of strengthening a board by including a service user? So this is a little bit about board composition as well in terms of skill sets, which we kind of alluded to. Any thoughts from anyone in the panel?
I think all this is part of good governance. And one important term that is very rarely mentioned, and that is ethics. And I think if you think of the whole area of ethics, it's only ethical when the organization is thinking of the people that it serves. And if it's just thinking of itself and its own growth, then the question is, are they behaving ethically or not? And once you go into the path of ethics, and then you begin to recognize that several other charities are on the same platform as you, serving the same community, and you're more inclined to collaborate because you exist for the benefit of a certain type of beneficiaries, and you're more happy to work with other organizations that are on the same plane as yourself. I think it's an ethical issue, and people need to be very mindful of it. When you join the board of a charity, you have a moral responsibility in terms of your behavior.
Yeah, anyone else wants to come in?
Yeah, Melvin. I just add on to what Gerard is saying is, I learned from a very young age, relatively. As a board member, usually board members are valued, amongst other things, their perspective. So that perspective, from where they come from, how does it inform the board, the rest of the board, and management? And so ensuring that diversity of perspectives, the kind of perspectives that you want, it could even come from your customer, your service user. If those perspectives are crucial, are important for the board, then yeah, by all means, bring them in. But if I'm coming from if I'm a chief information officer of a large bank and I'm asked to serve in one of the SSAs, for example, I'm valued for my perspective as a digital person, for example. I don't try to give perspective on investment, for example, because that is not what I'm valued for the perspective. So board members usually would bring very valuable perspectives from where they are that complement and supplement, the leadership and the management of the charity.
I think I'll jump in here. The question is essentially, what if the board goes awry? Discovers a purpose of its own. But then fundamentally, that's why we ought to have good corporate governance. Because it's precisely when you have a proper constitution, where the board has a proper terms of reference, that there's a proper evaluation annually on board composition, board effectiveness, where we actively engage our stakeholders and we are transparent in all we do, which is why the entire code of governance, I would just say I'm biased. It is this miraculous document which provides us with the DNA and the foundational precepts of what we need to put in place so that we have all our checks and balances in place.
Well, you'll be pleased to know what Gerard announced earlier, that code is going to be simplified, amended, based on principles, and hopefully that might sort of give a little bit more broad-based approach to the whole idea of charity governance. I don't know, Gerard, do you want to comment a little bit more on that? Because one of my questions related to that was, can you give a flavor to our audience today? What might some of those principles, key principles that you might be looking at in terms of the new code?
No, I think of a combination of principles, and there are certain fundamental governance issues that we think is a must-have, and that will still remain prescriptive. But why we're changing to some of the things in the principles is we don't want people to have a template mentality. Because it's listed there, they tick the boxes, and we want people to reflect. Are they actually putting into place the spirit of what the code itself is saying? I think that is most important. So it's work in progress. As I mentioned, we're getting feedback from the end users as well, and see how best we can make it simpler. And also it will be structured accordingly, as usual, between the smaller and the bigger charities. We don't want to make life more difficult for the smaller charities as well. Yeah.
Okay, I just want to bring in one more question on boards, and then I want to move on to the other topic on sustainability, which is also very big and very big on the theme of this conference. But this is more comments coming from one of our audience, Raj Sivaram, saying that, you know, what is the view of the panel? So he says, diverse skill sets on boards are important, but equally important is whether they share the values and have a passion for the purpose of that particular charity that they serve on. So educating the new board members on the values of the entity and their acceptance of these values is very important. Any thoughts on this?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Rajan, please.
Rajan first, and I'll come to Gerard.
Rajan first, yeah.
I think he's got a very excellent point, because induction of new board members to the purpose and the idealism is extremely important. In fact, this should start even before the board selection. Board members are selected. They have the mindset to their aims and the purpose of the society or the organization. Secondly, I've seen it happen. The key board members or all board members must at least a number of times engage with the beneficiaries as well as the volunteers 2 to 3 times a year at least, so that you keep tab of the ground exactly what's happening. Yes, you may have a corporate or may have a broad view, but however, you really need to have that ground tech view too. Yep.
Thanks, Rajan. Gerard?
Yeah, in fact, I would highly recommend, especially for the larger charities, to have a nominating committee. And the consideration of the type of board members, the skill sets and knowledge must be strategic. And really, a nominating committee role is to look at the needs of the organization at a particular time and decides what are the missing links, the gaps, knowledge gaps, skills gaps, and go on the headhunt for the appropriate board member to join the organization to reinforce it. And after doing that, the first question, even for all the charities out there, do you have a term of reference? Do your board members know what is expected of them on coming on board? They are not just a pretty face there, to attend board meeting, have coffee and cakes, but there are certain expectations of board members itself. It's not a place to park yourself post-retirement.
Oh, that's an interesting thought, because there is a question that's kind of related to the point that you just raised, Gerard. Maureen Fong is saying it's not easy to entice new board members, especially the younger ones. And respectfully, the ones who are under 40 may not want to serve, whereas those who might have more time will be those nearing retirement or retired. And I appreciate that some of you are fit into that category, so I have to respectfully put this question forward and see what you think.
I think younger ones, as I said, term of reference, I may have the terms of appointments is helpful because they know what's the commitment. But more importantly, the younger ones like to know what are you asking them to join the board for? What are expected of them, the contributions? So that thought process must be done. You don't tell a young person, just join the board and then see what you can do. That's not how they function, not professionals anyway. And by the time you explain it, the professional will say, no, that's not my area of expertise. Maybe you're choosing the wrong person,
Any quick thoughts from anyone else? Because otherwise I want to ask a question on sustainability.
No, I think we have come across the same thing when we have a nominating committee and sort of have a tea sessions with the prospective board members. They do ask the young ones a lot of questions, just like a job interview. What do you expect of me? How many hours I got to spend? And at the end of it, let me check with my wife too, of course, because there's a lot of time spent before they come on. But I think that's very relevant, very, very useful. Yes.
Okay, folks, let me just move quickly to sustainability. A number of you have mentioned it. Of course, some of the speeches today, including Chin Siong's presentation on sustainability, it is a key area that will affect all walks of life now, including charities. What do you think needs to be done to help charities adapt to be more sustainable? I mean, one thing to say, you should be more sustainable, but the question is, how do we bring the charities along that journey? Any thoughts, Chin Siong first?
Well, I would say, go back to my presentation, is to start really exploring with the corporates in how to help them with sustainability. There is a lot more perspectives around sustainability that needs to come in and inform the charity. And I find that when you talk about sustainability, it's very broad and there's a lot to cover. So is a charity able to take that on themselves? And I would say start with approaching the Alliance for Action team, engage corporates in conversations, or even collabs to get what you want to do as a form of direction setting right before you embark on it. So that would be my quick response.
Chin Siong, while you're there, a question from our audience, Tendi Arathi Arumugam. Are collabs still going on? I mean, how can a charity be part of this?
Oh, yes. Please reach out to our colleagues. And I think hopefully the admin here can provide the contact at NVPC. We do run multiple runs of collabs. And you know what? They're actually run by the corporate leaders themselves, some of them, where they actually bring their thinking and says, okay, oh, now you have this problem, and this is how we can actually support and so on. So that is the first stage of integration at the idea level before then you get into the structures and collaboration for the partnership.
Okay, Shiu Ling, just on that same question on sustainability, what do you think needs to be done to help charities be more sustainable?
So I fundamentally feel that good corporate governance is a given, right? But the next part is talent management. It's all got to do with the capability, skills, and talent within the team to execute the purpose you wish to deliver to the society. And once you manage that, then you start creating space and margin for innovation, thought leadership. And that's where you then move to the next level and understand, with our shared humanity, what we wish to deliver in the years ahead. So it's really got to do with how we manage our staff talent and capabilities.
A related question to this, folks, is really what's going to be needed for the partnership of the tripartite, I suppose, the public sector, the private sector, the charities. What's needed to make this whole thing work? Is it a case of just sharing resources, best practices, skill sets, financial, what might be some of the combination, if you like? Any thoughts on this?
I'll jump in here because in this past year, I think the community care sector has been so well supported by our agencies like AIC and NCSS, because agencies in this past 2 years have really understood how operators on the ground need to manage. And so they've evolved. I think the same with our private sector companies, like what Siong has said. Some of them have made really excellent efforts at leveraging on their own competitive advantage to better serve the community. And really for the charities ourselves, is to then grow our ability to receive the help that's out there. So I think it's a matter of perspective, understanding that we need to rely on each other. And most importantly, as what Minister said, our social networks are critical, and the ability to form good partnerships in this tripartite alliance. And that's everyone's responsibility.
Indeed. Gerard, do you want to come in?
Melvin, yeah, our jump in Shiu is spot on. Since you mentioned AIC as the chairman of AIC, we do go out there and try to help the organizations. And where we do succeed and do achieve good successes is when we're dealing with quality boards and quality. We have organizations where we get very frustrated, because they will listen, but they will not apply what is required of them because they're not yet there in terms of governance and so forth. So really, the key to success is, as Shiu say, really having quality board and management. They are the one that can carry on a good conversation with the various stakeholders and ensure the partnership works.
Well, talking about partnership, I think that's what this whole idea of joining forces, that's been a very key theme that stood out for me in the course of the speeches and of course in the discussion today. As we try to conclude this session, I just want to go around the block and ask for your concluding point in terms of what is that one piece of advice you would give to charities today on turning this crisis into opportunity. We spoke about, issues to do with the board, diversity, agenda, and so on, and also on the sustainability equation. If you want to give our viewers today one key piece of advice, what will that be? Maybe I'll go around the block and start with the lady first, Ling.
All charities have been set up because they wish to serve an unmet need in society. And all charities are pioneers in trying to foresee what the community might need. And I suppose it's no different now. With this COVID pandemic that's upon all of us, I think charities are called upon to remember this pioneering spirit and truly reach out and understand what the community needs and receive from the various expertise available, the corporate structure, governance, and expertise that's needed to deliver on what they perceive the community needs in the future. So the advice is remember the pioneering spirit. Remember when we first set up how remarkably difficult it was, and the situation is the same here today. And go forth.
All right, thank you so much. Briefly, Rajan.
Very briefly, yes. I think as long as we are resolute in our goals and deliverables, what we have to be resilient and sustainable is the manner in which we are going to deliver this in the future. So which means that you need a very nimble and able board. Even you are not in that framework, you should be sitting down and forced to think in that way, how to do it differently, because it's going to be different.
Siong, a quick thought?
Yeah, I'll summarize as 3 C's. 1, capabilities. I think most charities have capabilities in delivering the operational services. But beyond that, capacities. The capacity, as to Shiu's point, human capital. Do you have the right human capital to continuously manage and improve what you're doing? And finally, the 3rd C is, can your capacity of your people handle the complexities of trying to do new things, complexities of managing multi-stakeholders, different variables that comes in and beneficiaries and so on, how do they come together? So those are the 3 C's I would just give as a parting shot.
It's very interesting because in Singapore, we love C's, right? Yep. We talk about 3 C's, 5 C's in the past. So Gerard, I'll give you the last word as another C, Charity Council Chairman. So that's 3 C's already. Final thoughts.
I think all the things that has been said by Siong, Shiu, Ling, and Rajan is absolutely spot on. I'll just add on to basically look fundamentally at the quality of your board. You can hear all these principles, you know all these things have to be put in place, but whether it actually is put into place and how well it's put into place depends on the quality of board. And remember, it's not a question of how big you become, but how well you serve the people that you exist for.
Okay, you know, on this note, we have to draw this session to a close. It's been a very, very informative session, very valuable thoughts that all of you have brought up. And I also want to thank all our viewers from wherever, because I think we have a lot of questions coming in, and I'm afraid in the time we can't cover everything. So I'm sure some answers will come from those who are monitoring those questions, and especially the ones that are very operational. So what sort of help do you need from where, whether certain agencies are going to be looking at certain things? I'm sure those questions will be answered in due course for you. So at this point, really, I want to thank our wonderful panelists, Siong, Gerard, Rajan, and Shiu. Thank you so much for sharing your experience and also your deep insights into this particular very, very poignant topic.